This hearing on the Subcommittee on Commodity Exchanges, Energy, and Credit, entitled Building Opportunities in Rural America Through Affordable, Reliable, and High-Speed Broadband, will come to order. Good morning and welcome to today's hearing on broadband internet connectivity and the great opportunities it presents for our rural communities. This is an extraordinarily important and very timely and very necessary hearing. And this issue is important one because it lets us shine light on those rural areas that have seen what broadband investment can do and are thriving because of their access to broadband. Rural broadband is a prime example of how government investments coupled with private innovation can create a ripple of success and increase the quality of life for Americans in our rural communities. So we're going to hear today from a cross-section of very knowledgeable people who have worked hard to increase access to and success in healthcare, agriculture, local communities, education, and small businesses. We're going to hear from them on their successes in leveraging broadband connectivity to enhance the services they provide to our communities. And it is my hope that through these stories, their reports to us this morning, that we can have a conversation, a meaningful, productive, beneficial conversation for our rural communities about those steps that we still need to take, because there are many, many rural communities that are crying out for our help and for broadband. In my home state of Georgia, for instance, we have lost 7 rural hospitals since 2010. I want to repeat that. So you see, 2010, just 9 years ago, and we've lost 7 rural hospitals. And this is third most in our nation. So there are so many of our states who are suffering an impact with the loss of hospitals and the absence of those hospitals and broadband access. In many cases means this. It means the ability to access telehealth, which 1/4 of rural adults say that they have used. Let's go to the field of education. The gap between rural and urban adults with a college degree continues to widen. Broadband connectivity opens up a range of possibilities for online continuing education and degree completion at an increasing range of schools, including comprehensive state universities and our land-grant colleges and universities, as well as regional schools with more specialized programs. Our farmers, for example, continue to use broadband to expand their toolbox and their knowledge base to make the most of their precision agricultural applications. And small businesses, they can leverage broadband to access a world's worth of consumers outside their own communities. But not if we do not make and expand this investment. And our subcommittee in agriculture here are committed to making sure that we expand this investment. Now, I wanted to have this hearing so that we can see what's being done well. What of those successes can be done in other communities, and also what work remains for us to do. And I also know that the Federal Communications Commission Chairman Pye plans on releasing an order for very soon, requiring increased reporting in an effort to improve the current failing broadband map system. So it is very important that rural America weigh in on these policy changes at the FCC and here in the halls of Congress as we continue to talk about proposals to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. This is the key that will open the door when Congress moves and puts forward the rebuilding of our crumbling infrastructure program. And we can't wait for that to start. And so I know that all of us on this subcommittee agree, both Democrats and Republicans, that it is essential that rural broadband is an integral part of any infrastructure package. And we're going to make sure that rural broadband is a major centerpiece of our rebuilding of our infrastructure package. So I'm eager, as all of us are, to hear from our witnesses and how they tackle the challenges in rural America to give communities the access and tools they need to thrive through our broadband technology. We have to work together to make sure that our policies encourage growth and success in our rural communities nationwide. And now, in the consultation with our ranking member and pursuant to Rule 111E, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today. And now it gives me great pleasure to recognize my distinguished ranking member, Mr. Austin Scott, whom I refer to affectionately as my cousin Scott,
That's right,
for his opening statement. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. We've been good friends for a long time, I think 23, 24 years, somewhere in there. This is an important hearing on a subject that resonates with all Americans. Specifically, it resonates with me and my wife and my children. We live 15 miles north of high-speed internet access, and we live 15 miles south of high-speed internet access. And there are many times in our life where the fastest access that we have is through connecting to our iPhone. So it's extremely important to us and to the industries that try to operate in areas like those that I live in and with my family. And so I want to thank our distinguished witnesses that are here today to discuss how affordable, reliable, and high-speed broadband can bring our communities into the 21st century. For more than 24 million Americans who live in rural communities, as I do, that do not have broadband internet access and lack the infrastructure for a reliable and affordable connection. As we'll hear from our witnesses today, having reliable, affordable broadband is not about having modern conveniences. It's certainly important for us, but for most Americans, broadband access is about access to information, options, choices, and quite honestly, it's virtually impossible to run a business without it today. Whole conversations happen entirely online, and the only participants are those who have broadband access. Information of all forms is created, shared, and consumed entirely through a broadband internet connection, and much of the machinery today is dependent upon these internet connections to function. It enables new tools that can't be replicated in any other way, shape, or form. Big data and artificial intelligence, cloud storage and computing, the Internet of Things and data analytics, telemedicine, something else that's extremely important to those of us in the rural parts of the country, and other modern tools simply cannot be replicated without broadband access. Broadband access has become a dividing line between those 24 million rural Americans and the modern broadband-dependent information and services most urban and suburban Americans take for granted. It's not just rural Americans who suffer from this divide, though. Suburban and urban Americans are equally cut off from the voices and talents, ideas of their rural neighbors. So for me, All options are on the table when it comes to providing our rural communities with the technological resources they need to grow and thrive. This includes strengthening effective programs already in place at the USDA and FCC, advocating for robust broadband support and an infrastructure package, and even encouraging innovative technologies like TV white spaces. This committee did great work last Congress in the 2018 Farm Bill to ensure that the USDA has the tools it needs to bridge the digital divide in rural America. Included were 2 amendments, which originated in our office, that I'm very happy that to have the support of this committee, that addressed accountability measures and expanded RUS loans and grants to the middle mile infrastructure projects. Now, some might say quality broadband infrastructure investments will connect rural America to the rest of the world. I would suggest that it connects the rest of the world to the benefits of rural America. By bridging this digital divide, will enable access to a wealth of economic opportunities for all parts of America, and it is in everybody's best interest. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. And now I recognize our distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Mike Conaway, for any opening statements he would like to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your kindness and forbearance. Thank you for scheduling this hearing. It's an important topic, one that's been on the top of the minds of most members for a long, long time. As the ranking member noted in his opening statement, broadband access is not about convenience. It's about being able to participate in modern life and the economy, which is rapidly moving onto the internet. For those who lack access, their lives are fundamentally different than those who do have access. As Ms. Molgard noted in her written testimony, broadband is a platform, a generic technology that is powerful because it enables the creation of other tools and technologies. The importance of broadband is one of the many reasons that I'm so proud of the Farm Bill we passed last December. We worked together across the aisle and across the Capitol to take the best ideas for how to build broadband infrastructure into our rural communities. We not only provided a new grant program to build broadband where it is needed, but also new requirements to build what is needed for the long haul. The forward-looking standards that we pass will make sure that new broadband projects provide high-quality internet service for long into the future. Because of the 2018 Farm Bill, USDA has the ability to better target its limited resources to the rural communities most in need. By prioritizing projects, incentivizing investments in more rural territories, and requiring better assessments for proposed service territories, we will be able to help our most rural and least equipped communities while protecting taxpayers. And finally, we also work closely with the Energy and Commerce Committee to strengthen the cooperation between the USDA, FCC, and the Department of Commerce. One important product of this cooperation will be a comprehensive report on the long-term connectivity needs of rural communities and the technology available to meet those needs. The 2018 Farm Bill broadband provisions represent a real success story that the members of this committee should be rightly proud of. But that success will be for naught if our appropriators, folks with the money, don't actually appropriate the funds that we authorized under our bill. I'm hopeful that before the ink is dry on our 2020 appropriations packets, that it includes robust funding for the programs we work so hard on. Let me also add my thanks to our witnesses for their diligence, preparation, and travel to be with us today. I look forward to your testimony. Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling us chairman and building out a record of how important broadband is for our constituents. I look forward to working with you and Chairman Peterson, Ranking Member Scott, and the rest of the committee in advancing this good work. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Conaway. Now, the chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. Now, I know that Chairman Peterson wanted to introduce our first witness, but as he is stuck in the Veterans Committee's markup, I'm happy to introduce our first witness for him, and that would be Mr. David Hengel. Mr. Hengel is Executive Director of the Greater Bemidji, an economic development organization in Bemidji, Minnesota. Good to have you, sir. Thank you for coming. And now I would like to, Ms. Craig, is Ms. Craig here?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Now I would like to recognize the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Craig, to make an introduction of our second witness.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It's my great pleasure to introduce Neela Molgard from Red Wing, Minnesota, here with us this morning. She is the Executive Director of Red Wing Ignite, which is an incubator for students, tech entrepreneurs, and local businesses. As the Executive Director of Red Wing Ignite, Neela harnesses the power of broadband connectivity and new technologies to create educational opportunities and foster innovation in our region. Prior to joining Red Wing Ignite, Neela led and helped create Red Wing's Care Clinic, a free medical clinic serving uninsured and low-income residents of Goodhue County, Minnesota. Neela has a long track record of leadership, serving our community on numerous charitable organization boards and committees. She played a pivotal role in forming Minnesota's broadband infrastructure priorities as a member of the Governor's Broadband Task Force. She's a graduate of the University of West Virginia School of Medicine, where she received a Master of Science in Community Health, and the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where she received a Bachelor of Science in Consumer Affairs in Business. Neela, it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Our third witness hails from my beloved state of Georgia, and now I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Allen, for the introduction.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, for this opportunity to introduce Dr. David Hess here today. And I congratulate this committee on having this hearing, which is critical to the survival, really, of rural America. Dr. Hess serves as the Dean and Executive Vice President for the Medical Affairs and Integration, as well as the Presidential Distinguished Chair of Neurology at the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University, located in my hometown of Augusta and the 12th District of Georgia. A graduate of Johns Hopkins University and the University of Maryland School of Medicine, Dr. Hess is board certified in internal medicine, neurology, and vascular neurology. Along with his passion for teaching, Dr. Hess's major area of interest is stroke and treatment for stroke and dementia. With over 185 reviewed publications, Dr. Hess has been involved in basic preclinical and clinical stroke research. He played a major role in developing the REACH Telestroke Network at Augusta University, which you will hear more about in his testimony today. This well-recognized telemedicine service now serves over 30 hospitals in rural Georgia. Additionally, Dr. Hess co-founded a telestroke company known as the REACH Health Incorporated and served as chairman of the board of directors from 2008 to 2018. Throughout his career, Dr. Hess has won many distinguished teaching awards and has been named to America's Top Doctors and Best Doctors in America every year since 2000. As my colleagues know, Augusta is well known for his contribution to the great game of golf. And as you will see, witnessed by the ties that Dr. Hess and I are wearing today, that we honor that tradition. But I will tell you this, Augusta is known through the efforts of Dr. Hess and his colleagues as the cutting-edge, high-tech medical center of this nation. Dr. Hess, thank you for being here today to share your testimony with my colleagues and for all the work you do for Augusta University and Georgia and this nation. And with that, sir, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And now I recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. OHalloran, to introduce our fourth witness.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Scott, for having this meeting today. It is my great pleasure to introduce Councilwoman Ophelia Wataamadi Corliss of the Havasupai tribe. Just a brief little thing. If you ever want to go someplace beautiful, go down to the Havasupai tribe. You can't get down there by car. You have to take a helicopter or hike down. But it is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It is my honor to represent the Havasupai tribe and to work in partnership with the tribe to bring access to what I believe is the most remote community in the lower 48 states. I've been working with the tribe to improve internet access by assisting the tribe to obtain a permanent educational broadband service license from the FCC, which has improved access to the internet. I look forward to hearing more about how internet access has improved access to information for members of the tribe. I also want to follow up on Ranking Member Scott's comment about introducing the rest of the world to rural America. They better get introduced, because without rural America and the people in rural America that we have to have there, urban areas wouldn't exist. So, and I welcome the Councilwoman here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Halloran. Next, I will recognize the gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
Excuse me. Please introduce our final witness, please.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Scott, for holding this hearing and allowing me to be in part of this subcommittee hearing today. I'm not a part of this subcommittee normally, but what an important topic. It's so important to Missouri, and I'm so proud to introduce our next guest. We have Mr. Blake Hurst, that I've known for many years, but he's certainly a champion of agriculture in Missouri. He's president of the Missouri Farm Bureau, where he has been a leader for years, as well as other agriculture organizations in the state. But Blake knows what he speaks. He is a lifelong farmer. He and his family raise corn, soybeans, and they also have a greenhouse operation where they raise flowers. But besides being involved in organizations, he's also very talented and prolific writer, which takes the message of rural America to such publications as the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, Today's Farmer, among others. And he's been very involved in leading efforts in Missouri, dealing with broadband development, as well as in the nation. Was a part of a working group here on a nationwide basis a few years ago, only 2 members from the American Farm Bureau representative to help look at connectivity and data and other issues that are important to precision farming. So we're very proud that you are here today and have the opportunity to share your expertise with us, and we appreciate all that you do for agriculture and look forward to hearing your testimony. Welcome to our subcommittee, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for allowing me the privilege of introducing such a fine individual to you today.
Well, thank you very much, and certainly I want to say, Mr. Hurst, please give this committee's warmest regards to your president, Mrs. Zippy Duvall. Please do that. He's a good friend of ours. Thank you all for those introductions. We will now proceed to hearing from our witnesses. Each of you will have 5 minutes, and when 1 minute is left, the light will turn yellow, signaling time is close to expiring. Mr. Hengel, please begin when you are ready.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Scott, and subcommittee members, it is a great honor to be testifying today. I'm Dave Hengel, Executive Director of Greater Bemidji in Bemidji, Minnesota, a public-private partnership formed to drive development and promote prosperity in our region. We have 3 staff people and an operating budget of $300,000, a majority of which is provided by our private businesses. I recently completed my 30th year in economic development. Bemidji is a rural regional center located 200 miles north of Minneapolis. With 65,000 residents, it's one of Minnesota's fastest growing areas, but it's also one of Minnesota's poorest. Over the past 7 years, we've created 1,700 jobs and wages have grown 26%, yet 1 in 5 of our residents still live in poverty. Despite a historic low, our unemployment rate remains higher than the national average. The economic development world has changed dramatically in recent years, the primary driver of which has been broadband. Broadband can level the playing field between urban and rural as never before. In the past, our nation has made bold decisions to ensure our rural areas are competitive, from ensuring access to telephone services to building the interstate highway system. I believe broadband is the interstate highway system of our generation. Without strong broadband, rural communities will be left behind. National policy has called for telecom services in rural areas to be comparable in both price and quality to urban areas. If rural America is to play a role in the global economy, it is essential that national commitment remain. Bemidji has been blessed. Our rural telephone cooperative, Havasupai Communications, took a visionary approach of laying one of the nation's largest all-fiber networks. As a result, nearly every home, every farm, and every business in our region has access to gigabit broadband. Moreover, Midco, a private regional provider serving the upper Midwest, also provides high-speed broadband services to the Bemidji area. With these two leading-edge companies serving our community, our broadband services rival any in the nation. Drawing on my experience in economic development, I believe broadband's economic impact is especially significant in the following areas. First, in corporate recruitment efforts. For a majority of my career, when companies considered our region, they would focus on three things: access to cheap land, cheap capital, and cheap labor. Now they look to access talent, quality of life, and the availability of high-speed broadband. Delta Dental is our most recent example. They are constructing a new $15 million operations center in Bemidji, creating 165 very good-paying jobs. They chose Bemidji in large part due to the broadband services offered by Paul Bunyan Communications. Their leadership shared the broadband we can get in Bemidji is superior to what we can get in the corporate headquarters in downtown Minneapolis. They are just one example of broadband playing a central role in our corporate recruitment and expansion efforts. Secondly, high-speed broadband is essential to winning the race to talent. In today's labor market, companies are looking to locations that have a quality of life to entice the best employees. As baby boomers retire, companies are investing in locations that appeal to the younger generation, for which a high-speed broadband is a must-have. They simply will not live in a community that does not allow them to be connected. Finally, high-speed broadband is central to our efforts to support emerging entrepreneurs. 3 years ago, Greater Bemidji opened the Launchpad, a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs. Providing co-working space, business assistance, finance, training, peer-to-peer networking, and mentoring. The most important resource we provide our entrepreneurs is gigabit broadband, which allows them to be connected to the world. Our Launchpad has successfully launched 51 new startups. I am not an expert in broadband policy or deployment, but I can testify to the impact high-speed broadband can have on the economy. For rural communities to be competitive, they must have the infrastructure to support the transforming economy. Historically, the infrastructure we focused on was great roads and highways, waters and sewer systems, and industrial parks. Those are equally important today, but they simply are not enough. High-speed broadband is now essential for rural America to compete. Because of bold decisions made by broadband leaders in my region, my community has the gold standard of high-speed broadband services. The impact has been clear. Companies are choosing our area over other potential locations. Young, talented people are moving to our region, and businesses are starting up at an unprecedented rate. I encourage you to do all you can to help other parts of rural America reap the same benefits we've felt in Bemidji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hengel. Now, Ms. Molgard, we will now hear from you.
Chairman David Scott, Ranking Member Austin Scott, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'm Neela Molgard, the Executive Director of Red Wing Ignite, located in a small town of Red Wing, Minnesota, nestled along the bluffs of the Mississippi, only 50 miles south of St. Paul. We have a diverse economy of advanced manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. Red Wing Ignite is a hub and a facilitator of community innovation, advancing students, entrepreneurs, and businesses to compete in the 21st century economy. That entails a co-working space, startup support, maker space, and programs to prepare our youth for the future workforce. We have cold winters, lots of eagles, people who work hard and want the best for their kids. And through Ignite, I get to help our community stay competitive. The City of Red Wing formed a partnership with Hiawatha Broadband Communications to invest in broadband infrastructure with fiber. That investment has made it possible for the stories I will share with you today. Red Wing Ignite launched in 2013, leveraging our gig network and our partnership with US Ignite, initially supported by the White House and the National Science Foundation. We are the only rural city in US Ignite's network of 28 smart gigabit communities, a program providing tools to build smart communities, driving new services, startups, and technologies. For us, broadband is like electricity. We turn it on and it works. Yet you need more than the gig to grow an economy. Rural communities require a different strategy, one that builds density of talent, expertise, and resources. Ignite is both a physical and virtual hub for innovation. Broadband was the essential first step, but so is an organization like Ignite, bringing opportunity, exposure, and access to students, entrepreneurs, and businesses. I'd like to share stories highlighting our 3 focus areas. First, growing our talent pipeline. We plant the seeds to grow future innovators, the employers of tomorrow. We provide leadership to create STEAM learning inside and outside the classroom, college tech internships, and worksite learning by convening schools and manufacturers. Tony was a high school senior participating in a tech entrepreneur class where students solve problems using technology, culminating in the opportunity to pitch to investors. Tony said, "I was exposed to people and curriculum that heightened my knowledge of coding and entrepreneurism, and now I'm launching my own startup." Second, advancing entrepreneurs. With US Ignite and regional partners, we convened a statewide Ag Tech Challenge, seeking new technologies to solve problems facing agriculture. The winner was Jack Killian with Poultry Patrol, a robot for turkey farms. It collects data and may increase the weight, decrease mortality, and salmonella rates amongst turkeys. Killian said, "This opportunity gave me a reason to explore an idea. With Red Wing Ignite's help, I was quickly able to get in contact with investors, customers, and mentors. Now I feel confident I can make Poultry Patrol a reality." Currently, though, finding turkey farms with broadband has been challenging. It's costly for farmers to implement this on their own. Third, supporting rural innovation. People want to choose where they live and bring their careers with them. We've seen this locally with people leaving urban areas for the benefits of small-town living. In response, Ignite has created a co-working space, makerspace, startup support, and other resources. The strongest network we have, even in the world of fiber, is the human network. How did we get here? I have one word: collaboration. Red Wing Ignite forges partnerships with government, academia, corporate partners, and individuals to grow our innovative ecosystem. As a result of our work, we were recently 1 in 9 communities nationwide selected by the Center on Rural Innovation to receive technical assistance funded by the Economic Development Administration to support our efforts to create an innovation-based economy. Through perseverance, we've learned these lessons. Communities without broadband are in jeopardy. Broadband access alone is not enough for economic vitality. Economic success should be evaluated by talent attraction, retention, and development, not only the number of new jobs. Public-private partnerships are critical for success and sustainability, and local champions are needed because it doesn't happen quickly. In closing, the African proverb says it best: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This work can't happen in isolation. We want to thank our local, state, and national partners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Hess, please begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank the chairman. I'd like to thank the chairman, the ranking member, Congressman Rick Allen, and the members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today. I am David C. Hess, Dean of the Medical College of Georgia. I am here to recount my experiences as a physician providing telestroke services in rural Georgia. Back in 2004, the early days of telestroke, I was coaching a Little League baseball team when I was called about a 45-year-old man with a stroke at Emmanuel County Hospital in Swainsboro, Georgia, a 25-bed hospital in Congressman Rick Allen's district. There were only 2 of us covering our telestroke network in those days. The baseball field was 25 minutes to my home, but only 5 minutes to Taco Bell. I handed the scorebook to their dad, jumped in my car, and sped to Taco Bell and used their hotspot. I logged in with my password, but the camera repeatedly froze when I zoomed in to watch the patient move their eyes. The consult was dropped twice, and I was starting to sweat, as every second counts in stroke. I was finally able to make the decision to administer the drug TPA, and fortunately, the patient did well. But it was stressful for me, even more stressful than coaching my last-place Little League team. Now, fast forward to April of 2019, where I delivered 12 telestroke consults in 24 hours to a number of rural hospitals in both Congressman Allen's and Congressman Austin Scott's district. The cameras never froze, and there were no major technical issues. 3 things have changed in the last 15 years. First, the bandwidth and technology have vastly improved, and I no longer have to drive to Taco Bell except to eat their tacos. Second, demand for telestroke services has increased. Third, I don't take calls often, as there are 9 others who share the call burden. Georgia is situated in the stroke belt, and there's a slide in your handout, a region of high stroke incidence in the southeast United States. In 1996, a drug called tissue plasminogen activator, or TPA, was approved for the treatment of ischemic stroke by the FDA. The drug works by breaking up blood clots that could cause stroke. There are two types of stroke. The most common one is ischemic, caused by a blockage of blood flow to the brain. The other type, hemorrhagic, is caused by bleeding into the brain. TPA is effective for ischemic strokes, but can be harmful or fatal if given for hemorrhagic strokes. This caused many emergency medicine physicians to be very reluctant to use TPA, and they require neurologists like myself to assist them in the treatment decisions. One of the problems is a lack of neurologists in smaller hospitals. During a stroke, 32,000 brain cells die every second, so every moment matters when administering TPA. To address this problem, back in 2002, we in the Department of Neurology at the Medical College of Georgia began to develop a web-based telestroke system to help treat stroke patients in rural hospitals. There was no system available, so we built our own. This involved three components: two-way audio-video, so we could see the patient, we communicate with the family, we could read the CT scan, and we had decision support software that helped us make the correct treatment decision. It was a web-based system, so we didn't have to sit and wait for calls in a specific wired room in the hospital. We could be at home or anywhere that we could have access to the internet. We call this program REACH. We have now performed over 13,000 acute stroke consultations in Georgia and have treated more than 1,800 with TPA, many of whom never been treated with TPA. Telestroke has now become the standard of care, with the American Stroke Association endorsing its use. Studies show that telestroke has expanded and improved stroke care in rural and super rural areas. When we first started REACH back in 2003, we had a lot of problems with internet connections to our rural hospitals. The video would often freeze and the consults would be delayed and occasionally drop. Bandwidth in rural Georgia has certainly much better today than it was 10 to 15 years ago, but requirements of at least 1.2 megabits will usually be needed for seamless operation. We also have improved technologies that allow us to operate in low bandwidth environments. We still experience problems with the video freezing and downloading imaging files. This problem is related to the people and resources necessary to adequately manage the bandwidth within the hospital. Even if rural hospitals have access to broadband, they do not have the technology or IT budget. Congressman Scott recounted all the rural hospitals closing in Georgia to support the infrastructure inside the facility, much less support a full-time IT person. The common example is the hospital guest network being allowed to use the same internet connection as the clinical applications. A better informed professional IT manager can set up restrictions on network use to prioritize clinical applications. Now, current connectivity in rural America is not adequate to provide telehealth consults to patients in homes and in small clinics. Lack of access to physicians is a problem. There are 8 Georgia counties without any physicians, 11 without a family physicians, 75 without an OBGYN, and 78 without a general surgeon. This is only likely to worsen as the shortage of physicians is getting worse in rural Georgia. Much of this monitoring will be done by nurses and advanced practice providers, such as nurse practitioners, using tablets, but bandwidth is still a limiting factor. We approve this model works with stroke, but telemedicine could be used to address many of their health needs in rural Georgia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hess. And now we will hear from Councilwoman Wadamajia Corliss. Please proceed.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Scott, for the invitation to speak today. My name is Ophelia Wadahamaji Corliss. I'm a member of the Havasupai tribe. I'm here in my official capacity as an elected leader. During my first term, I established a working relationship with MuralNet to help the community bridge the digital divide. The Havasupai Reservation is the most isolated American Indian tribe in the lower 48 states. The village of Supai is located on the floor of the Grand Canyon, where the only way in or out is an 8-mile hike by foot, horse, or helicopter. Currently, the village receives internet access by microwave point-to-point radio link, providing 10 megabits for tribal administration. Using an email browser and submitting grant reports have been the most successful use of that SM system. The current health clinic run by the Indian Health Services has obtained 1.5 megabits for its electronic medical records. Doctors lose the connection and file, refusing to use the electronic system, choosing paper charts instead. In 2015, Coconino Community College partnered with the tribe to establish the first GED program. The only available internet was in the village center. Many of the students had jobs, and lacking home internet access that year, the program had no graduates. To help bridge the homework gap the GED students experienced, Council gave permission in 2017 to pursue high-speed internet through private LTE network. MuralNet and the tribe filed a request with the Federal Communications Commission for a special temporary authorization permit to use educational broadband service spectrum over the village of Supai under its educational burden of proof guidelines. Within 5 days of the license approval, we received customer premises equipment for homes and established our first high-speed internet connection. Things changed with the newly approved STA permit. CPEs could connect to internet at home. Our Head Start teachers came into compliance with new OHS standards, and teachers at our local Bureau of Indian Education school could lesson plan, research, and do continuing education from their homes. In September 2018, our GED students signed on to their first live math class taught 168 miles away. This was a historical moment in 2018 because it marked the tribe's first opportunities in online education. While we have had successes, we have more needs. The tribe's BIE school only goes to 8th grade. To receive a high school diploma, students must leave their families at 14 years old to attend a boarding school out of state. A percentage of these children are unable to adjust to leaving their families and return to the village, never going back to their studies. A credit recovery program and online education school are needed. Over the years, agencies have supplied us with failed telemedicine equipment. Telemedicine is important because of our isolation, and we are still living without this capability. Our community is suffering from a suicide cluster, and we are left with no in-person professional services for up to 3 weeks every month. The reservation sees 35,000 tourists a year. We need better emergency communications to the furthest gorge. Their safety is our responsibility. Navigating the canyon can sometimes be a life or death situation, and for these reasons, the Havasupai tribe must move forward with upgrading this new pilot network. 7 homes in the village center with direct line of sight have broadband speeds. The planned network expansion will bring broadband coverage to the whole village. To make our network financially sustainable, internet access can be sold to tourists in the campgrounds. The tribe has decided its people deserve the opportunities afforded by broadband. The ruralness and population size of our community means there is no return on investment from outside internet service providers or major telecoms to consider building the infrastructure. The benefits we have seen from this project are like none we have ever seen before. There is renewed hope in the community and among tribal council that online education opportunities can become reality. Telemedicine can work to help improve the community's health. These services ordinary Americans have been using for the past 20 years are still not a reality for my community. These disparities may be among the most extreme, but the disparities of the digital divide are felt across Indian country. I support monies specifically allocated to rural American Indian nations within the funds being negotiated. I can only speak to what my expertise is, which is my community, the most isolated and rural tribe in the lower 48 states, which is the story of American Indian country. If my story and expertise can also expand into other parts of rural America to help your decision-making to support build-out for all rural America, then I am honored. Now you have the ability to help communities like us, and I know that you will. I will be honored to address any questions the committee might have of me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hurst, welcome. Please begin.
Good morning, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the House Agricultural Subcommittee. My name is Blake Hurst, and I'm from Atchison County, Missouri. Serve as President of Missouri Farm Bureau and sit on the Board of Directors of American Farm Bureau, whom I'm representing here today. Broadband is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. Rural broadband is essential to modern agriculture, the farmers and ranchers who grow our food, and for the quality of life in rural America. I'm driving my combine and the phone rings. It's my 84-year-old father who's driving our other combine. The conversation goes like this. Dad says, "I just got a call from John Deere." I said, "Uh-huh." Dad says, "They said I was running out of DEF," which is a fuel additive we use. I said, "Uh-huh." Dad says, "They're watching us." Farming has changed. We used to think that we just grew corn and soybeans. Now we generate data, trillions of bits, all containing information that can make us more efficient, economical, and can reduce our environmental impact. On our farm, that data allows us to apply more fertilizer on our most productive land, cut fertilizer rates where yield potential is less, vary seed populations in real time across the field, and yes, Dad allows our equipment supplier to monitor our machinery, alerting us to potential problems. After we collect this data, we must transfer it from our machines to the company who writes our prescriptions for fertilizer and seed, share it with our partners who supply our seed, and eventually utilize it when making crop insurance and other business decisions. Transferring this data, which is essential to the future success of every farmer, requires access to fast and reliable and affordable broadband. My friends in the livestock industry use broadband-based programs to monitor the development of each animal, analyze markets, make data-driven management decisions, and from monitoring feed usage and rations to scheduling delivery of animals, livestock farmers use broadband daily to improve the efficiency of their operations and ensure the health of their herds. While broadband connectivity is critical on croplands and ranchlands, rural communities also need broadband for healthcare, government services, and educational and business opportunities. We still have members who have to travel to the nearest fast food restaurant in order to use a hotspot so their children can finish their homework. That really is not acceptable. Broadband is important to rural Americans because we deserve the ability to be a part of the larger society as well. Current and future generations of rural Americans will be left behind without adequate broadband service. While most Americans take broadband for granted, 26% of rural Americans lack access to broadband compared to only about 2% of urban Americans. And we have to use an asterisk with even these figures because the current data and maps used to collect broadband coverage are inadequate. The ability of the FCC and all other relevant agencies to utilize accurate coverage is the highest priority. With limited funding and an overabundance of need, more granular and accurate maps are critical to successfully target and distribute federal broadband programs. That is why Farm Bureau supports the bipartisan HR 3162, the Broadband Data Improvement Act, that would improve the accuracy of broadband coverage maps and better direct federal funds for broadband build-out. We say a special thanks to Representatives OHalloran, Kirkpatrick, and Marshall for their support and sponsorship of this fine legislation. Many of our state farm bureaus have engaged with their state legislators to improve rural broadband development. We helped organize the Missouri Broadband Initiative Working Group, which brought together providers, local, state, and federal officials, and end users of broadband. Many of the challenges we identified in Missouri are addressed by the changes made in the 2018 Farm Bill, including the high deployment costs, delivering technology that will be adequate for the future, accountability, mapping and data collection, and meeting technology needs of agriculture. Thank you for your leadership in making the necessary strides and providing the technology of the future while safeguarding taxpayer dollars. Farm Bureau appreciates the subcommittee's interest in rural broadband, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share our perspective with you today. We look forward to continuing to work with the subcommittee in advancing the shared goals which I have highlighted here today, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, and thank each of you for your testimonies. They were very informative, and it gave us much, much information that some of us were not nearly aware of, and so we thank you for that. Now we go to questionings for the members. The members will be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. And I'll start things off. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Hess, may I please start with you? Because in your testimony, you talked about the stroke belt. And Georgia is right there in the heart of that. Let me share with you some of the latest statistics. In Georgia, 3.5% of adults in Georgia had a stroke in 2018. In rural areas, the statistics for Georgia was 6.1, nearly twice that average. And it was 8.2% in 2017. And, and this is one of the reasons, I give a health fair every single year in my district for each of the 17 years we got here. And we address that dearly. We have the doctors and the physicians and all the great hospitals, as you may be aware. We have great recognition for this health fair, and that's what we address so much. Can you explain the increases and decreases of these statistics? And also, can you tell us the answer to, are we doing something differently year to year, or are stroke numbers normally this varied?
Yeah, Chairman Scott, very, very good point. So not only is Georgia in the stroke belt, but most of the coastal plain of the Southeast, so South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and it's usually in the coastal plain, but it is. And there's racial disparities too. African-American men have a very high rate compared to whites. So African-American men are the highest, and African-American women, and then it drops down to white women and men.
What would be a rate racially on that? That's a very good point. What is the magnitude of the differentiation?
Yeah, well,
between them?
it's a ratio of probably between 1.5 and 2 times as high, but that even doesn't adjust. You have to look at age. You have to adjust it for age. And the tragedy is, like the patient I talked about, 45 years old in Georgia in the stroke belt. We have strokes occurring a decade earlier than other parts of the country. So not only are there more strokes, but they're occurring in the prime of life. So it's not unusual to see a 45 or a 50-year-old person. It's not just elderly people who are getting strokes. And the other thing is the strokes was here only the tip of the iceberg. I don't want to get too off broadband here, but there's a lot of silent strokes that will occur that people don't even know about. For every stroke you have, there's 5 silent strokes, and that's a big contributor to dementia. And a lot of this could be, I'd rather actually focus on prevention than just treating the stroke would be better. Its treatment of hypertension is by far and away the biggest bang for your buck. And we don't have as many programs that we used to have to treat hypertension. And I think, a lot of rural patients don't have good access to health care. And so their blood pressure isn't as well treated. African Americans have a higher prevalence of hypertension. They have more difficult to treat hypertension, and for any given level of blood pressure, they have more end organ damage like stroke. So there's these definite racial differences, and they tend to be accentuated in rural areas where there's less access to health care.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. Ms. Molgard, you gave a very interesting saying. You said, if I can remember correctly, you said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. What did you mean by that? Give us an example of what you meant.
Yes, it's an African proverb that I've heard, and I've just really resonate with the work that we do in our local community level. To do the work that all of us here are doing, you need to forge these partnerships with a variety of sectors. You have to work with your government, you have to work with your schools, you have to work with your local businesses to really drive sustainable change in your community. So that quote I like because it might take more time. This work it's heavy lifting, But with you bring the right people together and everyone's at the table, you can make lasting impact for your communities, your regions, your state, and nation.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you won't mind if I use that. I'm going to be on television promoting my health fair, and I will use that. But I will give you credit.
No,
That's a great
It was
thing.
not from me. I just researched.
Oh, it's from Africa. Good. We'll give her that. I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Ranking Member Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was waiting on the good doctor down there to give us a lecture about the fact that we go so far as to fry our vegetables and fried okra, fried tomatoes. We haven't figured out how to fry lettuce yet, but we pretty much fry everything before we eat it down there. It certainly the way we eat, and it's good eating.
Yeah.
Has an impact on the strokes we have. I want to focus first, Mr. Hurst, on you. I remember the old days of my granddad's 4430, and you pull a broadcast spreader, and when you turn the irrigation on, you put just as much water on the wet area as you did on the dry area. Can you talk a little further, and you mentioned this briefly, can you talk further about how you and your colleagues and the ag industry as a whole is able to utilize broadband on the farm to help reduce the inputs, fertilizer, pesticides, water, the way that they help production agriculture be more profitable and have less impact on the environment while at the same time having greater yields?
Well, we keep pretty accurate yield maps as we go across the field, and basically can check the yield for down to a few square feet. And it's counterintuitive, but what you learn when you do that is to put a little more fertilizer on the parts that are green on the map that are of higher yields, a little less fertilizer where it's less productive. Before, we would use the same amount of fertilizer across the field, and it was wasted on places where the soil was thinner, was poor. We also do the same thing with seed, a higher population, where we have better capacity for yield. And this is, the less runoff obviously saves us money, but maybe more important for society, it saves the application of chemicals that can cause problems when they end up in the wrong place.
I would add to the fact that the machinery today is much more complicated than it was in the past. And if you have a problem, I have my tractor's instruction manual is literally on my iPhone. But if I don't have access to the internet,
yeah,
I can't get the information I need.
We absolutely use just Google a problem, and if they can't fix it, and we have to have a tech come out from our dealership, the first thing he does is hook up to the internet to start tracing the codes.
No, I beg to differ. First thing he does is he starts that timer when he leaves the shop.
Absolutely.
And they get a pretty penny, as my granddad would say. Doctor, you have a relationship with Tift Regional Hospital where my father is a physician. I know I've talked with him many times in the past. Him as a orthopedic surgeon and trauma surgeon, just the ability in rural America for a physician to pull up an x-ray at their home instead of having to drive to the hospital to look at a patient to know if that's something that is an emergency that requires an operation today, or if it's something that the patient's actually better off with a wait-and-see approach. If you could expand a little further on how it's helping deliver health care into the rural parts of the country, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, well, almost any hospital to conduct any kind of business has to have broadband now, because you're sending images, like you said. If your father wants to look at an image at home, or they're sending images to be read by these different teleradiology firms, which may be in Australia reading
That's right.
scans, and so you have to have that to function. The trouble is at peak times, that bandwidth there's a lot of competition for that bandwidth in a hospital, and that's the problem. Now, the problem is getting into patient homes is the other problem, and getting into clinics. A lot of times they don't have broadband access, so.
I was thinking the physician's home.
Yeah, well, the physician's office can even have trouble. You're right. I mean, you can have downtimes, even we sometimes have trouble in Augusta. One of the worst things that ever happens is if my cable goes out from a lightning storm, you know, because I do telestroke, we all have backup systems. But, you know, we have to have wireless backup systems. You're right. So even physicians, you know, trying to conduct business is very difficult in rural areas. You know, Tifton, where you are, you know, you already recounted the issues, and that's probably one of the better places we've seen in rural Georgia. I mean, some of the places we see, these 25-bed hospitals, they really struggle. They struggle, you know, I don't know how they do it.
My time's about to expire. I want to say this, as someone who, from Tift County, we're very fortunate to have a quality medical community there. We also have I-75 and 319 and 82 that come through there. And as you know, we have a shortage of neurologists in the area. And when we have a neurological incident, if we're not able to have the telemedicine, even if you are able to have the telemedicine, one of the biggest questions is, which way does the ambulance go? Does it go to Thomasville? Does it go to Macon? Or does it head your way? Because in these areas where you have so few neurologists, even if the closest hospital, if that neurologist isn't there, or if that neurologist is in a long procedure, the quickest help is sometimes further away.
Yep.
And the access to immediately know where that patient needs to go in those situations is, it truly is the difference in life and death. But thank you for being here.
Yep.
Maybe have a second round.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. And now we'll hear from the distinguished lady from Minnesota, Ms. Gregg.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member today for holding this hearing. We all know that broadband is the gateway to rural schools, businesses, and healthcare providers. I'm extremely pleased to have Red Wing, Minnesota's own Neela Molgard here to share the success story of Red Wing, one of the most incredible stories of how broadband can transform a community's economic future. Neela, in your testimony, you mentioned that Red Wing Ignite has played a significant role in creating new educational opportunities for students in STEM, coding, and hands-on internships. How does broadband access expand the learning opportunities available to students outside of the classroom? And additionally, how does your organization collaborate with local school districts to improve those career pathways for students?
Happy to answer once my mic is on here. Yes, when we launched our nonprofit, we felt we should be focusing on our current innovators, the startup community. We learned quickly, though, we also need to help the future innovators. On our daily work with our manufacturers, with the startups we support, and the new next-gen technology that we see in the nation, we know that there's new skills that are needed today. And those are in artificial intelligence, in cybersecurity, in coding, in automation. And so our schools and schools all around might not have the capacity or the ability to teach those new skills that are needed. So we work with our partners in our school districts, in our local college, to try to provide those skills necessary for the students, whether that be inside or outside of the classroom. A couple years ago, we started a STEAM team. We added A in there for the arts. And what we did is we tried to provide more learning opportunities for these students with those skills that are so needed right now. What we learned, though, is we didn't want to do one-and-done programming. We wanted to do sustainable, impactful change. And so we worked even closer with the schools to help provide some leadership to implement a new careers pathways at our K-12 system, which will be new curriculum and experiential learning for our schools. I'm pleased to say that out of the 4 pathways, 2 will focus on technology and science, and the other would be business and entrepreneurship.
Thank you for that. You really addressed my second question in your answer, because we were talking about as well, because we're looking at how do we make sure that your program is aligning Red Wing with the job skills that are needed in greater Minnesota. Can you talk a little bit about just, I know this committee, and I'm also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, we often talk about how can we make sure that people can earn a good opportunity in living where they want to live. So talk a little more about the entrepreneurship that's been unleashed. It's just stunning to me that you've been able to incorporate all of this here in what is just a beautiful Mississippi River town that is growing by leaps and bounds.
Yes, so I mean, we've had some early successes with increasing the job market and keeping our community competitive. One program, I could focus on is our Learn and Earn program. It's 1 in 5 pilots in the state of Minnesota, working with high school students in high-demand, high-growth jobs. So we have placed students in manufacturers around us, and they not only get a college certification, but worksite learning, so they can choose the path. Is it college, or is it directly into career? And so success rates right now, we have 5 students going to technical college, we have 4 going to a university for engineering, and 3 got a job immediately out of high school for local employers. With our startups too, we're just providing the tools needed to be able to advance their business one step at a time with tools that they would not automatically have.
Thank you so much. I just want to add that, this hearing is incredibly important. We're talking about broadband, but I hope we all see that through your testimony here today, Neela, it takes intentional leadership, it takes collaboration to make sure that we reap the full benefits and opportunities of the federal dollars that we're investing in these programs. So thank you for being here, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Craig. Now, Mr. Baird, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Minority Member Scott as well. Appreciate the opportunity to have questions which deal with, my first one deals with telehealth. And Purdue University Center for Regional Development has conducted numerous studies on the lack of rural broadband and social and economic benefits to Americans, and what can be gained from increasing that access. And many of you as witnesses have mentioned those benefits here today. In the Wabash Valley Heartland Innovation Network, it's a 10-county area in my district that includes much of the area of about 97,500 people, and they don't have access to residential broadband. We have been interested in expanding the appropriations that would be involved in improving or funding distance learning and telemedicine, and to give better access to the equipment that would help to do that. So, Dr. Hess, I would ask you if you would care to elaborate on the types of healthcare services that can be, in addition to what you work with now, that might be provided to a patient in his or her home. And I'm also looking at the kind of equipment that works best for that patient in order to receive that telehealth and telemedicine.
Yeah, so good question. So one of the biggest needs, one of the biggest needs is telepsychiatry, and telemental health is a huge need. Actually, if you look at requests that we get, it's often for telepsychiatry. So there's a big movement now to develop different platforms, because that's a huge need. Some of that would be done in clinics, some of it could potentially be done in patient homes. Most of the thing in patient homes would be more preventative care. In medicine, we're not very good at preventative care. We tend to be in a fee-for-service world where the more we do as physicians, we get paid. That's just how the reimbursement is set up. But we like to go to a world where we're rewarded and reimbursed for preventing disease, but we're not there yet. So, a lot of this can be done, as I mentioned. It doesn't have to be, there's such a shortage of physicians now in many areas that a lot of this can be done with nurse practitioners. They tend to be very, very good at this, developing relationships. So you look at patients that have complex diseases, chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension. and you focus on them, and a lot of that management can be done by nurses in the home or pharmacists to review their medication. The other big group is, 5%, we call them the super users, 5% of patients consume about 50% of the healthcare resources. They go to emergency rooms, they get admitted a lot. And that would be a group to focus on, and there's been some movement now to focus on those patients. It can't all be done through telehealth. You do need boots on the ground. You need to touch people. You can't do everything by telehealth, but telehealth is a great adjunct, particularly in rural areas. The other thing is we can provide specialists tend not to be in rural areas, and telehealth is a great way to bring a specialist consultation, if not to a patient's home, to a community health clinic where they're going. So I think it's a combination. Most of the stuff in a patient home is monitoring for diseases you have. So you're monitoring the blood pressure, and we're not very good at controlling blood pressure. And a lot of times it's because we put people on so many medications, they can't keep track of them. I can't take 3 pills a day. I forget. How can we expect our patients to take 10 pills a day? So that's best done by nurses, nurse practitioners, and pharmacists. Doctors, we're not too good at that, honestly. Well, there's a lot of vendors. Our company that we sold was mostly focused on more more in hospital based, but there's more and more units you can use at the home. They're much simpler. They're often, you want to do something with an iPad or a computer. There's more and more things you can do with an iPad now, but you need the broadband connectivity. And on an iPad or a tablet, I should say, you can put a lot of patient education, because we're not very good also at educating our patients. We tend to rush through. We tell them we're going to get an echocardiogram. They don't know what that is. A lot of that information we put on tablets that they could work with. So there's a number of systems. I don't want to go through all the commercial. There's a number of companies that do that. But I think if you have the connectivity, you can always find a vendor to help you with the technology. The connectivity and the human factors are more important than the technology. I mean, the technology is almost a commodity. There's many good vendors for it.
Thank you very much, and I see I'm out of time. I wish I had time to have every one of the witnesses. I got questions, but thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Warren. Now we recognize the distinguished lady from Iowa, Ms. Axney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing. Rural broadband, of course, is essential to modern agriculture, small businesses, and rural communities, as so many of you are talking about today. And as a member of this committee and a member of the Rural Broadband Task Force, getting our rural communities connected to the internet so they can grow and thrive is definitely one of my highest priorities. Iowa ranks among the top 10 best states for education, opportunity, healthcare access, but it comes in 33rd for internet connection. The FCC defines rural broadband as 25 megabits per second. As a reference, watching a movie on Netflix takes at least 5 megabits per second. And our rural communities and farmers, several have pointed out, are not sitting around watching TV. Many of the latest farming technologies require broadband connections for data access and analysis of their fields. Farmers and businesses rely on broadband access to manage their inventory, communicate with customers, and grow online. Adequate broadband access is critical to the success of our rural communities, small business owners, and farmers. According to the FCC, 26.4% of rural Americans lack access to adequate internet speeds, and that's definitely true in my district. We don't know how many Iowans are lacking broadband access because current FCC maps indicate a much higher connectivity rate than actual data from our local communication companies. There are large parts of my district, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, where cell phone service isn't even available, much less internet. And in the areas that do have internet coverage, there can be huge differences. So for instance, in Red Oak, it's ranked 54th among all Iowa cities for internet connection, but literally just 23 miles away in a town very similar in size, Shenandoah, it's ranked 430th. And even my largest city, Des Moines, has 37% slower internet connectivity than the national average. I think much of this comes from the disparity of the last mile, which is when internet providers won't extend into the areas that they see profitable, often stopping right at county lines or just outside the business district, leaving rural communities to either foot the bill or not be able to compete in a 21st century economy. I want to highlight some folks in Montgomery County, Iowa, and the important work they're doing, led by Shauna Silvius, the Director of Montgomery County Economic Development. Montgomery County is leveraging USDA's new market tax credit program to complete that final mile of connectivity. And when they're successful, they will literally be the first county in Iowa to have certified fiber optic to every home and business. The first in Iowa, and it's 2019. When I spoke with Shauna and Red Oak Mayor Bill Billings, Montgomery County supervisors Bryant Amos, Mike Olson, and local business owners like Kevin Cabbage and Mickey Anderson about the economic development that high-speed internet brings, they all shared that connecting our rural communities is critical to ensuring our rural communities survive. From finding all the right avenues to funding, to navigating all the different agencies, the USDA, FCC, Department of Commerce, et cetera, our communities have very little guidance or assistance. So I'm really happy to have you all here today because given your experience, you've been successful in navigating these broadband issues and helping connect your communities. So I'd ask any one of you to comment and give me the advice that you have to help communities like mine who are either struggling to get started, having trouble finding enough funding, or who need to close that last mile gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Great questions and great comments, by the way. I think your district is similar to mine, I would imagine, and what we deal with. And first off, I want to recognize the fact that there is bad data out there, and I think that it's important that we gather some data. We were lucky in my region because we had a cooperative that has decided to lay the fiber because it's part of their mission. They believe deeply that it's economic development and community development is part of their mission as a rural cooperative. And so that was we're very lucky to do so. I think with Midco also, having a personal interest as a company in the success allowed them to make what would be decisions that are beyond what I would say would be business case analysis. And so I think that you have to use all the resources you can. You have to bring together both the business community as well as the education community, the healthcare community, and make the case. In Minnesota, we created the Office of Broadband, which has provided some leverage funds as well as federal funds to start reaching that extra mile, which is incredibly difficult to get to.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, please. Thank you. I live about 20 miles south of Shenandoah, so I can certainly agree with the lack of broadband in that community. Good help in Missouri from rural electric cooperatives and other cooperatives. Actually, our broadband comes from a small cooperative in southwest Iowa to our farm, and they reach across the state lines there. So really outstanding efforts, I think, from the cooperatives, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And for 4 years, I was the vice president of an engineering and consulting firm that worked in rural broadband. And, we designed and put into place about 8,000 miles of fiber optic network a year, did a number of wireless builds as well. And I'm not sure there was anything more rewarding than seeing the real joy, the satisfaction of these communities that were getting connected to real, gigabit-type networks that they had not had access to previously. And I was particularly struck when there were traditionally underserved communities or sub-communities. And we've talked a fair amount today about demographic differences in broadband availability. I want to shift just a little bit to demographic differences in broadband adoption, or to what extent people are actually using the speeds that they can get access to. And of course, we often talk about this with regard to age. And so I was just curious for any of the panelists, if you want to share from your medical or tribal or agricultural communities, stories you may have about getting older Americans connected to these resources.
Well, I just start with one anecdote. We were actually going to apply for a PCORI grant to look at post-stroke care, and most stroke patients are elderly. And so before we did that and applied, we were going to use telehealth and actually connecting with iPads and smartphones to try to do follow-up with nurses. So we started first. One of the nurses said, why don't you do a survey and see how many elderly Americans with stroke have a cell phone or know how to use a cell phone? And the numbers were disappointingly poor. Most of them didn't have access to a cell phone. They may have had a grandchild or a child did, but they weren't necessarily in the house. And more than half of them didn't know how to use a cell phone nor how to use a tablet. And they were intimidated by that technology. Now, this was only 3 years ago. So I think when you get to, in terms of the health field, when you get to elderly people who have stroke, who may already have cognitive problems, that can be a problem. I think you're going to need someone in the family maybe to help them. Often, the younger you are, the more technology adept you are. So I think it is an issue with some of our aged patients. That's just my anecdote.
I would say also that it's about the adoption as you speak. It's when individuals can really change the way that they work, learn, and live using this technology. They won't substitute it. I mean, why our youth are no longer going to go to communities that do not have broadband. That will be a requirement for future employee, as our youth are looking for new homes. So once we have the technology and everyone has technology, it should be like electricity. Everyone should expect it. It shouldn't be some have and have not. Then they can use this new technology, provide better health care, provide better educational outcomes. They'll have that adoption rate. It will see the value to their day-to-day lives and how they care for their elderly parents or improve their own health. And then at that point, I think adoption will really be finalized.
And maybe for you, Councilwoman, I mean, I would imagine that dealing with tribal elders, sometimes it was hard for them to, I mean, you talked about the increase in the quality of life of people using some of these new speeds, but I'm sure tribal elders lagged in that access.
Mr. Johnson, you're correct. In the idea of public health, we are working on some crisis response protocols within the community, and we have set up kind of a public education guideline and system that we are about to deploy in regards to our state and Medicaid. Even the community themselves don't know what questions to ask when they are flown out of the canyon to a regional medical center. And we are just now establishing a question card. So in the idea of, as a community, Native Americans usually do a public outreach, and we'll have a community meeting where we'll invite the public, and that is where we would start.
And then for Mr. Hurst, I mean, all of my buddies in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are ag producers are using technology a lot. My producer buddies who are in their 70s and 80s, less so. I'm sure my experience isn't unique in that way.
I mentioned my father in the testimony. I kid him, he's the only guy besides drug dealers that depends on a burner phone from Walmart. But he pays attention to those maps, so we're making progress, but there's definitely a generational difference.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. We will now recognize Ms. Kirkpatrick, lady from Arizona. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this really important hearing. I have been working on expanding rural broadband since I was first elected to the legislature in Arizona in 2004. I grew up on the White Mountain Apache Nation in Arizona, a very remote tribe. When my cousin was principal of the elementary school there, she started a computer lab. Because she realized that practically none of the households had computers in their homes. And yet if these kids were not computer literate going on to higher education, and a lot of them went off the reservation to boarding schools, they would be at a lifelong disadvantage. But even that was restricted. They would spend maybe an hour or two a week in the computer lab, but at least they had some exposure. So I'm very concerned about this for our rural areas that lack connectivity and that opportunity for our young people. I just spent a week with my 2-year-old and 4-year-old grandsons who had their iPads with them the whole time. It's second nature to them to use their iPads. But that's not the case for a lot of rural students. And I've hiked down to Supai. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. But I just wondered, Ms. Wadahamaji Corliss, how many households in Supai have computers in their homes?
So with our old SM system, we did have a public network with 10 megabits, and we did try to deploy home modem use. And out of that old system, I would say that was around 2010, probably about 20 homes were able to receive the modems. But does that mean they have a laptop? I think it mostly means that they have a portable device, which would be a cell phone or an iPad. So also in regards to our GED programs that we have been trying to initiate for since 2015, that is also the same case. The students will ask the tribe for a laptop because they don't have one. Last year, I was only able to get 2 laptops donated. So in the same way that I was able to check out the CPEs for home internet use, I also checked out the laptops, and currently we only have 2. So I would have to say, Ms. Kirkpatrick, I would guess of the 128 homes in the village of Supai, I would guess about maybe 28 of those homes may have a computer.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I have a Veterans Advisory Council, and we just met when I was home last week, and they come from all over the district. I have a very rural county, Cochise County. And the veterans depend on telemedicine and the internet to communicate with the VA hospitals in Arizona. And I just like the panel's comments on what we can do to improve access for veterans in rural America in terms of telemedicine.
Yeah, well, I'll take a first step. So the VA has actually been at the forefront of telemedicine. I mean, they've actually taken the initiative in a lot of areas, but I think a lot of depends what vision you're in and what VA is doing it. I know there's some, it's not too widespread where I am in Georgia, but it sounds like your VA is pretty far ahead, and you're absolutely right. Veterans, there's just so many VA hospitals, and they've tried to develop more clinics, But again, there's wait times, there's access issues, just like there is everywhere else. So, but the VA I remember the VA was talking about this, in the early 2000s and late 1990s. They were ahead of the game. So I don't know that I have a magic pill for that, but it's a very good question, and they have been at the forefront compared to other healthcare systems.
Yeah, they really have been working at it. There are still some software problems that I'm hearing about, but they've really taken the lead in that. Any other comments from anyone else on the panel? I have about 30 seconds left. Okay, yes.
Hi, I do have listed here available types of spectrum that maybe the VA would be or consider either applying for a license, or there are also unlicensed networks here. There's a Citizens Broadband Radio Spectrum, which is called CBRS. That's a 3.5 gigahertz. It's lightly licensed and should be available late summer. There's the Educational Broadband Service Spectrum, but the FCC did just make their determination on that yesterday. There will be tribal priority windows, and then that'll go up for auction. There's also unlicensed spectrum of 900 megahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, and 5.8 gigahertz. And there's also what's called TV white space. It's currently unlicensed, but it has a wide enough range of frequencies to be available in most areas.
I'd love to work with the tribe on expanding that in any way I can. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from the distinguished lady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzell, for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you each for being here. What an impressive panel, and I just think your communities and your states are very blessed to have you in leadership. And I want to start with Mr. Hurst. You talk about in your testimony about the importance of broadband mapping in agriculture. Can you describe some of the problems that we are currently facing, about a little bit more about the legislation that you mentioned that would be helpful, but also about the FCC's National Broadband Map Initiative that is underway, and how you think that might be helpful?
The way it works now, as I understand it, if one person, one home in a census block has access, then that means that census block is not eligible for any federal programs. But it may be that it's just only one home, because in rural areas, because of the low population density, a census block can be a lot of square miles. So we need more granular data that gives us a better idea of how good that penetration is, how many people actually in the census block are being served. So that's why it's so very, very important that we work on these maps. It's one of our initiatives we're working on with our broadband group in Missouri. 3162 that I mentioned has that as its goal. There's also things written in the Farm Bill that would improve our mapping. So in order to fix the problem, we have to be able to measure it, and so far we can't.
Right, and I'm glad that we are focused on that, because I think that's just something that hasn't been focused on as much, but it is critical that we get the maps right so that we can give the funding where it's needed and make sure that people are helped. So thank you for that. Ms. Molgard, I really was inspired by hearing about more of what's going on in Red Wing, Minnesota, and your enthusiasm and just the great things there. But I did want to get more specific, because I want to do this more in my district or whatever. So you said that it's funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration that provides technical assistance and support to rural communities. So is the support financially, or is this technical assistance? What specific federal programs? Was it Reconnect funding? Was it the FCC's Connect America Fund? Or what did your community tap into, or is it just privately funded to help you expand and bring this broadband to your community?
In my written testimony, I list many of our partners.
Push your mic. There you go. Thanks.
In my written testimony, I list all of our wonderful partners and funders. So it's been public-private partnership. Our city of Red Wing supports us. We have local foundations. We've had other grants, state, and then with US Ignite, that was funded by, they were initially funded by the White House, the National Science Foundation grant dollars. Currently, as you were referring to with the EDA, we were selected by an organization called the Center on Rural Innovation to be part of their Rural Innovation Initiative. And because we were one of 9 communities in the nation, we were able to receive in-kind technical assistance to apply for the I-6 Challenge Grant. So we don't know the outcomes of that. Now that I'm in here, maybe I need to go and see the status of that grant application. But it will be a wonderful network of communities, 9 communities throughout the nation that will now work together to try to improve our innovation-based economy. So it's the EDA I-6 Challenge Grant is what I was referring to with the help from the Center on Rural Innovation.
I think we've come a long ways in providing some funding, but the problem, and I think you referenced it in your comments, was sustainability. I mean, there's money to help put the broadband there initially, but then you've got to be able to sustain that model, and so I was curious about that. But I wanted to talk about speeds just a little bit and go back to Mr. Hurst. As you know, Missouri has set out a new broadband plan, but the plan's goal is to achieve universal access to high-speed internet with speeds of at least 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits upload for all Missouri citizens by 2028. And I know there's similar goals elsewhere. Can you talk a little bit about how and why the states are adopting these broadband speeds that significantly outpace the federal programs right now? And I was glad to offer the amendment in the Farm Bill that says now that USDA programs have to have at least 25 download and 3 upload speed, but that is still a far difference than Missouri's goal. So can you talk on that just a second?
Yes, we appreciate your help on the amendment, because before it was 10 and 1, which is totally inadequate. Congresswoman Axney mentioned the how much broadband it takes to watch Netflix. But the point is, in a rural home, you may have someone watching Netflix at the same time 2 or 3 children are trying to get on the internet to do their homework at the same time that perhaps we're uploading the data that we've generated that day on our combine. So we need the faster service because we're finding more and more ways to use broadband. So I think Missouri's goal is ambitious, but it's necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from the very distinguished Congress lady from Virginia, Ms. Spanberger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your stories about how important broadband is to rural communities. Coming from a district like mine in central Virginia, where many of my constituents don't have access to broadband, your stories of the challenges your communities have had to overcome to get broadband and how it often took longer than you would have liked really do resonate with me, and they reflect the stories I've heard from my constituents. One of my constituents, Roy from Orange County, wrote to tell me that when he moved into his house 16 years ago, various internet providers told him that he would have broadband very soon. You probably know where the story goes. It hasn't happened yet. He has a farm business, and the lack of high-speed internet significantly impacts his outreach and his sales. And he's also seen that the effect of the lack of broadband has had on the local high school students as they try to do their homework. Another constituent, Crystal from Henrico County in our district, works in healthcare, and many of her rural patients don't have easy access to the internet, and she isn't able to give them the same follow-up healthcare information online that she would like to and that she's able to with other patients. As communities in our districts are looking to expand our access to broadband, I appreciate the opportunity to learn from your experiences. And I was particularly struck by some of the comments that you made, Councilwoman Amolkar and Dr. Hess, related to the ability to use broadband internet as it relates to telemedicine. And recognizing the challenges that you all have seen in your different communities, the challenge of having insignificant speed for applications such as telemedicine. And sir, you recounted the story of your Taco Bell experience when trying to deal directly to a patient. Knowing what you know now and what you have seen, I'm wondering where you think other constituencies might be able to be a part of this conversation, be it medical professionals, be it veterans, as my colleague mentioned. So frequently, those of us who represent rural communities and those who live in rural communities are talking about this issue, but I also represent suburban communities where this issue isn't seen as prevalent. And so I'm wondering how, beyond this committee room, we can continue to have this conversation so that people across the country understand the impact this has on our country. And I'll start with you both if you have any comments. Thank you.
Hi there. In regards to telemedicine services, I think public outreach and partnership are important. I don't know how many times I've come to DC and nobody knows who the Havasupai even are. And in that regard, how are they supposed to know that I'm from the most rural Native American tribe in the lower 48 states? Now, the ruralness of my community, as I mentioned, will not create return of investment for people to build the infrastructure, and that's the way that it's been all the way up until this point. We have been able to partnership with a nonprofit organization, MuralNet, whose mission was to bring broadband speeds and connect the homework gap in Native America, and we just happened to be their first partnership, and we're able to get an approved STA license through the FCC, only one of 6 since 1995. times have changed. The equipment, the cost of it is not as much as it used to be, and it cost us $35,000 in total for our first deployment.
And when we're looking at how we can help communities like yours, like the ones that I serve, do you have any suggestions to other witnesses as well about how we can bring additional voices to this conversation, so it's not just the people who are always impacted who are kind of ringing the bell of how important this is from a healthcare perspective, from an educational perspective, or from an economic perspective, how we can really get additional advocates to recognize the value of ensuring that all of our communities are connected. And so it's not wholly dependent on people like the councilwoman or people like Ms. Molgard to bring it to their communities and to do that outreach.
I do have a short statement that combining government initiatives to help bridge the rural digital divide so that we could work together in partnership to help build those networks.
Would anyone else? Dr. Hess?
Yeah, it's a very good question, very hard question. I'm trying to think how to answer. At Charlottesville, where you're close to, I don't know if it's in that district, University of Virginia has a great telemedicine program, and we work with them. We work with them very, very closely. I'll tell a story. We once had a hospital that was reluctant to start telestroke. Some of the physicians didn't believe in it. And so I went and gave a talk in a Methodist church one Sunday night, and they asked me, I was telling about stroke, and they said, well, what about this drug TPA, Dr. Hess? If we go to the local hospital, can we get it? And I said, no. And I gave them how they could, and they literally marched on the hospital. So I think, you get hospitals, you get churches, you get communities to realize what they're missing. Now the internet connectivity is better to hospitals, but there's still, I think you got to get the public behind you. In Georgia, we work through the churches, which were a strong voice. And I think working with the university, that's the world I know. Working with the universities, we have a lot of support groups. That's how we've kind of done it. Work with, other community health centers, federally qualified health centers. Of course, I'm biased at the telehealth point. You bring all those constituencies together, and I think that helps. But it's a very good question, and I'm not sure I answered it very well.
No, I appreciate that. I have a list of constituencies you mentioned, so I appreciate that input. And I believe I am out of time, so I will yield back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Mr. Van Drew, the gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here and sharing your experiences, your knowledge, and your insight for everyone that is here. The testimony we've heard today is important, and it's important, believe it or not, in New Jersey. And I know everybody thinks, what is, this guy doing on the Ag Committee? What's he involved with agricultural issues? He's from New Jersey, the most densely populated state in the United States of America. But actually, I have the most rural part of the state, and my district makes up 40%, geographically 40% of the state. So I have almost half of the state. And we have some of these same issues. And I remember when I became, years ago, a new state senator, learning about those issues and being so surprised that people were really concerned and worried that the emergency services that they wanted to get or needed were not foolproof by any means, and sometimes it didn't work. Concerned that their kids were really having a difficult time doing their homework. Concerned that their businesses weren't doing as well as they nearly could, especially in the way business works today, because they weren't able to access the internet properly. Concerned for their safety, concerned for their economic security, concerned for their farming, because again, farming has, as you all elaborated so well, farming has changed so much over the years and is going to change a lot more, and our world is going to change more. We're going to be short of doctors in the areas that you're speaking about, but we're going to be short of physicians almost everywhere. Maybe not in Midtown Manhattan, but let me tell you, in major swaths of the country, we are going to have a physician shortage and a healthcare shortage that's very serious. So imagine how it's going to be in areas like this. And even, I'm from South Jersey. In my area of South Jersey, people who need care either for developmentally disabled kids or need a host of other things aren't able to access them. So it isn't only in the Midwest or in certain areas. It can be anywhere. We have the lowest per capita income, the highest rate of obesity, the highest rate of teenage pregnancy. I can go through the list. And yet just a few miles away will be some of the most beautiful homes on the shores and the beaches. It's a real dichotomy. So the work that you're doing is important because you can't give people success. You can't, but you can give them opportunity to achieve success. And that's what you're all about, and that's what this is about. You can't expect people to do as well as they should when we have this kind of digital divide, and we still have it, even in places like South Jersey, as unbelievable as that is. So I just, along those lines of success, I just thought anybody can answer it. Broadband obviously makes the economy better. Any particular ways that you believe it levels the playing field? And I think you know the answer, between urban and rural in the job market.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman, for the comment. And being in economic development for 30 years, I have seen great changes. And certainly broadband has been the central focus of why those changes have occurred over the last 5 years. I think the increasingly economic development is about a race for talent. And I can't stress enough the importance of being able to provide a community that people want to live and to want to be a part of. And that certainly broadband is a central part of that. That is simply going to be a must-have. People are not going to live, particularly young people, in communities where they cannot stay connected. And so that's so important. There also, I would add, is there simply isn't any low-tech jobs anymore. There just isn't. There's no low-tech industries. I think in my neighborhood or my area of the state, logging, wood products manufacturing, sawmilling, all those are significant data users. And so I think it's critical that without the broadband, you're simply not going to be able to keep up with the global economy.
And I think you're right, and the world has changed, whether we like it, whether we don't like it, it's the reality. And I think those of us in government have a responsibility to make sure that everybody does have that opportunity. And just alluding to what the Congresswoman was saying before, a lot of people don't know that. It's amazing. Even in my district, from the western part of the district, which is generally less affluent and doesn't have some of the access to the eastern part of my district where people do and are quite wealthy, they have no idea. If I was to tell them that, they'd say, no, not in New Jersey, that can't be, you know? So I think we have our work cut out for us, and I think it really is an important subject for the entire nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vandrew, for your excellent remarks. Agree with you wholeheartedly. Before we end, I'd like to recognize our ranking member for any additional comments, closing, or questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, Mr. Hurst, answer to Ms. Hartzler's question. The industry has the ability to provide shapefile mapping today to the FCC, and if the FCC would begin to use that, and they could use it virtually immediately. It would not take long at all to implement that. Then we would have those more accurate maps that you and Ms. Hartzler were discussing. And ma'am, I appreciated your testimony about the different capabilities and technologies that are out there. As someone who lives 15 miles north of us, I would call it a city. Most people would call it a town. You know, I recognize that the technology that's going to work at my house might not be the same technology that is deployed in the city. I don't care what technology it is as long as it works. And it seems that that's your approach, and I appreciate that very much. If there's anything that this committee can do to help you with any licensure that you may need help with, I think that the committee would be more than willing to help provide that support to the people that you represent in your tribe. Doctor, I appreciate you being here, and appreciate the others who testified as well. It seems to me that what we have maybe is the old question of the chicken and the egg. Do we build the biggest, fastest interstate we can, or do we you know, how do we get it there, I guess, is my question, Mr. Chairman. And I don't care what the technology is. I'm not biased to any of them, but I do know this. We can do a better job, and we have to do a better job because we're losing our population in rural America. Right. I represent 24 counties right now. I expect after the next census, I'll probably represent 26 or 27, and Congressman Bishop, just to my west, currently represents 28, and he'll probably represent 31 or 32, and you guys in the metro area
I thought 8 was
are picking them up.
I represent 7 right now, so.
Yeah, it's
used to represent 13.
Yeah, but there's been a huge population shift from the urban areas to the metropolitan areas, and I think this is one of it's education, it's healthcare, but in the end, a lot of it revolves around technology and access to that, and so we can play a big part in fixing that. Thank you so much for the hearing. To those who were here to testify, thank you for your testimony. It was extremely important. And I think this is something that we can and will be working together to help resolve.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member. You touched on a number of very important parts. And to answer part of your question going forward, we need to understand that at the bottom line right now about this, it takes money. It takes money. It takes priority of funding. And so with that in mind, I'd like to make a suggestion. I think I would start with you, Mr. Hurst, with the American Farm Bureau. You all are well placed. No national organization is more well placed to get into this bargaining situation with rebuilding our infrastructure right now. We need our rural communities to have a seat at the table as we look at the budget, as we look at where this money needs to go. And so I would like for you, and as I said, to give Zippy, my good friend Zippy Duvall, we work together on many things. And of course, you know, he comes right out of Georgia, so we go back to my days in the Georgia State Senate. But here's what I'm suggesting. I think there is some definitive, well-respected source that needs to submit to this Congress the kind of funding that our rural communities need to devote, that we need to devote to accomplish everything that we've said here. And I hope that you all know that from the passion you've heard from our committee members, that we in this subcommittee, commodities, exchange, energy, and credit, we are this financial arm of the agriculture industry and our whole approach. There's nobody better to be the champions for getting proper broadband and internet access to our rural communities. But you and your organization is probably the premier organization that is well placed to say to us, this is how much money it's going to take for us to be a part of. Right now, I think the figure, it keeps bouncing around. Sometimes it's hard to get this one in the room, that one in the room at the same time. But we're going to get there. We have no choice but to move ahead. Our infrastructure is crumbling. But we have to send this clarion call out that crumbling is not just taking place with bricks, with mortar, with just roads, the highways, the trains, all of that. This crumbling has been taking place in our rural communities. And we've got to lift up our rural communities and give them a premier prime seat at the table as we divide and determine the amount of money that we need. And as I said, right now, it's fluctuating between $2.5 trillion. My estimate is when you look at what needs to be done in the rural communities with broadband, it's life-saving. I mean, it's more than just crumbling roads. Infrastructure is human beings. They're us. They're people, not just roads, not just airports. We got to get that through. It's education. It's job training. It's health care. It's lifting up and making people not just want to live in rural areas, but will desire to live there. And we've got to give that attention to it. So I'd like for you to understand that that's why we had this. Austin Scott and I met early last year when we knew at the beginning of the year that we would be in charge of this. This is a strong, bipartisan, Democratic and Republican committee. That's what it takes to get the job done. We are uniquely placed to do it, but we need you all to tell us as soon as possible how much money it's going to take, how it should be applied to make sure that our rural communities are the sparkling oasis of life, of excitement, of productivity, that they have been as the source of the foundation of our country. Our country wasn't founded on big cities. They were founded with people in small towns and towns that grew into cities. But it is the rural communities that need to have our energy and our direction. And so I want to make sure that you all take down as an assignment. Our subcommittee here, and Ranking Member Scott, myself, and our members will be your champions to get this done. But the next step is we got to get the money appropriated to do it, and we need you all to let us know how much it's going to take so we can start selling it up here. All right? Again, thank you all. And there's some homework I need to read here. Let me put my glasses on. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Commodities, Exchanges, Energy, and Credit is adjourned.